All right, well, Klutzy McGee was at it again. I have this bag, which I keep, 4 different types of chocolate chips. I got chocolate chunks, all different sizes, because you never know when a shoot is gonna call for something very specific in terms of like the size, texture, and color of the chocolate. Well, I had these set up right over here. I was moving the table around and they fell on the floor. So now it's just all mixed up together. I'm not organizing that. What's shaking bacon? I'm Joni Simon. Welcome to my studio. This is where I do food photography. So if you're into that, you go ahead and hit the subscribe button. And today we're going back to Lightroom and we're going to talk all about the crop tool, the crop and straighten tool, which you're probably like, Joni, I know how to crop a picture, but there are some tools inside of there that you may not know live there that are super duper helpful, especially if you ever struggle with really getting the right composition in your food photography, and then also making sure that you nail the proper crop depending on where those images are going. So, the 4x5 for Instagram, which really, is there anything else other than the 4x5 for Instagram? So if that is something you're interested in, well, you stick around. So today's setup is a chocolate cherry bonanza, and well, it's a full contact sport. I've already got chocolate all over me, but I was inspired by these cute little cast iron skillets, which I've used them for other recipes in the past, little like cookie skillets, things like that. But I thought, I need a gooey chocolate brownie cake thing going on. And then I had some frozen berries hanging out in the freezer, and I thought chocolate and cherries, that is one of my favorite all-time combinations. So that is what we're using today to help aid us in the illustration of the crop and straighten tool. And you'll notice that I am shooting tethered today, which I do the majority of the time I'm here in the studio. If you missed that video, I've got it linked right up over here, so you can go grab that. But that makes this whole process a whole lot easier so that we are making decisions as we're shooting, that we know exactly what we're going to be dealing with in editing before we actually sit down and do all of the final edits. So you can see this is a super simple setup. We don't have a whole lot going on here. It's just the 2 skillets along with a napkin on a surface. Everything's kind of in the darker tones, but making sure not to overpower that delicious looking skillet. And then I have a big old diffuser set up sort of off to the back of the scene, just so that we get that light coming in just slightly backlit, like back into the side, and that then we get some of those really nice highlights on the back sides of those cherries, and then also the raking light, just getting really all that beautiful texture that's there on the brownies. And then as far as the actual light source, I'm using the Westcott LED Flex Matte, the 2x2, but for your situation, you could certainly be doing this right up against a window. So at this point, I really haven't set the composition. I more or less just put everything out there, made sure I had the light that I wanted, that all the colors work together, the props look nice together. So I'm going to take a test shot, and then we're going to use Lightroom to help guide our compositional decisions. Because I know I hear from a lot of people that say, oh, how do you nail composition? Like, it's such a hard thing, and it really is. Composition is a multifaceted, multi-theoried, multi-leveled thing, and there's a lot more that goes into it, but there are definitely some guides here in Lightroom in the crop tool that can help kind of put you on the right path. All right, so we've taken that test shot, and because I've got it set for auto import on Lightroom, it's going to go ahead and show up in my library, and then I'm going to jump on over to the develop module so that we can go ahead and develop our photo. And now what you want to do is scroll over to the crop tool, which you can of course click on that with your cursor, or if you like the shortcut keys like I do, you can use the R key, and that will go ahead and open up that tool for you. And as you can see, then that throws this grid over top, and you've probably seen this before. But there are other things that we can overlay on top. And this is how we're gonna make some decisions related to our composition. Can you tell I'm getting excited about this? So now what you wanna do, because we have the crop tool open, go ahead and hit the O key and see what happens. Just do it, see what happens. And you'll see we get a completely different set of lines. And these lines are all defined per sort of some of the general rules related to compositional theory in the world of photography. Again, these are not hard and fast that if you follow these rules, the image will work every time, but they are a good general guideline if you're ever struggling with composition. And so you'll see the first one that pops up is the rule of thirds, which personally, I'm not as big a fan of the rule of thirds. There's actually others that I like better. If you're not familiar with the rule of thirds, I will link some articles down below that are just sort of helpful guides on what all of these things mean more in detail. But for me, rule of thirds doesn't always apply. I like to work more on the diagonals. And so if you hit O again, all of a sudden you'll see these diagonal lines. It's very similar to the rule of thirds in a lot of ways, but instead it's going in at diagonals, and to me, I love to follow those diagonal lines. And so what we can do is use this as a guide in going back into our live view and position the various items that we have in line with those diagonal lines. Let me show you what I mean. So here we go. All right, so you remember where those diagonal lines were, right? So, I mean, or at least you try to remember. And now what I'm gonna do is rearrange the skillets, rearrange the napkins so that I can more or less get everything falling along those diagonal lines that we saw in Lightroom. So let's go ahead and take another shot and see how we did. All right, hop over to Lightroom, and there it is. So more or less, I have now got those two skillets running along those diagonal lines, a little bit more visually pleasing than the composition we were rocking before. But let's try something else. Hold on, let's jump in and put the other skillet. Let's work the other diagonal instead. So instead of that upper left to the lower right, let's do the upper right to the lower left and see what happens. I mean, this is the fun, right? And so this is what's great when we have these guides in Lightroom, which can give us just some ideas. If your creative juices are ever lacking, or you're like, why isn't this image working? Just try playing around with those lines. Play around with that overlay a little bit. So now that I've got those repositioned, that looks pretty good. Let's make sure we've got focus, of course. We're using manual focus. Any questions about the focus, of course, I've got that video linked right up over here. All right, and then go ahead and take another shot. Let's jump on over to Lightroom, see how it looks, see how it lines up. Let's see if I have nailed it. And there it is. And actually, I think this works a little better than the previous image in terms of composition because those double lines, that they are intersecting the skillets in the same place on that diagonal. So I think that's pretty effective. Now, here is though my favorite overlay, and this is what we call the golden triangle. Again, if you have more questions about the theories behind this and why this works, you know, go ahead and link some articles below. But this is my favorite tool in terms of when I am super stuck when it comes to composition. Just bust this overlay out and it's gonna really, I find it really helps me out. Because what this is more or less doing is creating a line for our eyes that's like an S curve. That's a really pleasing line for our eyeballs to look at. So now we hop back in our scene and we use that guide, again remembering where did those lines fall, where did they intersect, and how can we recompose this image based on that golden triangle overlay. So in this case, there was that intersection in the lower right corner, right? So I'm gonna go ahead and put the main skillet, because that skillet looks a little better than the other skillet, so that's why that one's in the front and the other one's in the back. So I'm gonna put that main skillet a little further towards the front, and I'm gonna put it right on those intersecting lines. And then I'm gonna go ahead and take the other skillet and put it where the other triangle intersects, near the top in the upper left. And so that's creating that really nice diagonal line for us. And go ahead and take another shot, see how it looks. See if I nailed the spot or not. And sure enough, we see that we've got that intersection right on those cherries. It draws our eyes right to the cherries and then pulls our eye up into the upper left corner where that other dish is. And then if you also notice the napkin, because of course, you know, we all love to curse the napkins. You're like, oh, why is it not laying in just that right spot where it's supposed to be? Well, you can see that I have it following the opposite line, right? Like our cookie skillets are following that upper left to lower right, whereas the napkin is following the right to left there on that edge in between the two cookie skillets. And so that's just a really helpful device in order to break up the image so that it's not just one monotonous like line going from left to right, but that we've got some angles, we've got some curves, we've got some interest. It's the S curve, it's an interesting line. It makes our eyes get excited and ultimately drives our eyes into that delicious brownie skillet in the lower right corner. And now this is also then when you can have some additional fun, because again, remember where those other lines were falling? Now we can use additional ingredients, additional props to follow those other lines. So I'm gonna place some cherries up here in the right, and then I can place some chocolate in the lower left, again following that line, that diagonal line going into the lower left, and it just, again, draws our eyes. It's like a little pathway bringing our eyes across the image. It feels balanced, it feels really comforting, it's easy to understand, and makes us want to eat that food. So now if we go back into the crop tool and hit O again for different overlays, there's some additional ones in there. Again, not all of these are necessarily applicable to food, not ones that I particularly get into. For me, the golden triangle is kind of where it lives, the diagonals, I love that one. But you can definitely play with the others. The next one in the lineup is the golden ratio, which is very similar to the rule of thirds, but everything's brought in a bit closer. So again, wherever those lines are intersecting, generally a good place to put the subject. You've also got the golden spiral, and why everything is golden, I don't know. It's the golden rule, the golden spiral, the golden ratio. golden. Everything that glitters is gold. I got the gold. Go for the gold. But the golden spiral is based on the Fibonacci sequence, if you were a mathematician, and the spiral and the nautilus and all that. And anyway, it's complicated. Read about it, link below. All right, so then you hit O again, and this is a super duper helpful overlay if you are ever planning to crop your images for something other than the 2:3 aspect ratio, which generally is what the cameras are shooting in. So you think about what's other than 2:3? Well, good old Instagram feed is 4:5. So you can see with this overlay, it's showing you exactly what a 4:5 crop would look like on this image, so that we can go back in, recompose the image so that it is more effective for that 4:5 crop. Because I don't know about you, but I have shot things at 2:3 and I thought, oh yeah, there's enough room on the edges that it'll still look good on Instagram. And then I go in and I do the cropping and I'm like, oh God, no, that doesn't work. That's cutting off like half of my subject, or it's cropping really weird, or it just looks strange. So this is a guide in order to help you make sure that you can nail that 4:5, because of course, you know, we're all living for the gram. Now, when you're ready to go ahead and make that crop, we jump back over into the toolbar over in the crop and straighten tool, and you're gonna select the aspect. And so depending again on where that image is going, we're gonna pick the corresponding aspect ratio. But then once you've made that crop, just to make sure that that is the perfect composition for that aspect ratio, we can jump back in, use the overlay tool again by hitting O, and pull up whatever overlay it is that we want to use as our guide. So again, I'm going back to the golden triangle, and I'm going to recompose the image based on the 4:5 aspect ratio, understanding where those lines fall, just making it overall, again, a stronger image. But now I do want to make sure you understand though that these guides, these overlays, are just that. They're guides. They are not rules. They're not hard and fast that you have to do these things. And honestly, in time, the more that you get used to setting compositions and that your eye can really understand line and shape and the relationship of those shapes and lines together in order to create a harmonious image, that will become second nature to you in time. You will start to intuit those things and you won't need the guides as much. But certainly they are a helpful thing if you're ever struggling, or sometimes you're just having an off day and you're like, ugh, I just need to get this picture done. I need to get this recipe published. I need to get this out. And so throw in some guides over there never hurt anybody. But also at the same time, feel free to break some rules, because that's why rules are there, to be broken. Okay, so there is one more super cool tool that lives in this little area of Lightroom that you may not know about. It has to do with straightening. Now, you might already know how to straighten the image. You use either the slider or you grab the edges of the image and kind of rotate them, and that can help straighten a non-straight image, right? Because for me, and this is sort of my personal belief system related to composition and balance and images, is that if you are shooting something, you want to make sure the horizon is just like the horizon is in real life, that it is exactly 180 degrees and it's not tilted. Now again, Alfred Hitchcock thought otherwise, and so more power to him and to you and to anybody else who doesn't want a straight horizon. But if you do want a straight horizon, or you want to be able to adjust your image based on lines in the image, you gotta watch. You gotta watch this. This is exciting. All right, so let's go ahead and take this image at a different angle of approach so that we're actually getting a horizon line in the background, right? But then what I'm gonna do, just to be crazy for illustration purposes, is I'm gonna shoot this just slightly on an angle, okay? Because again, I want it straight up and down, but just for the purposes of showing you this, because sometimes when you're shooting, I know if I'm ever shooting freehand, I am very frequently not shooting directly 180 degrees. I'm always kind of tilted, usually just tilted just a little to the right. So let's go ahead and take that shot on a tilt, but we're gonna fix it in Lightroom. Super easy and without the little slider. This is like an automatic magic moment. Watch this, watch this. All right, so here's the image in Lightroom, and as you can see, it's on that sort of tilt, and so I want to straighten that out. So what I'm going to do is take that little ruler, and I am going to place it on a line that I want to end up being horizontal. So for example, what we're going to do is take it across this skillet, because we want that skillet feels a little tilted right now. We want that skillet to be straight up and down. And so I'm going to take it from one edge to the other edge, exactly halfway through the middle. All right, drag it and drop, and as soon as you drop, what it's going to do is it's going to align that image based on that line you just drew. Let's go ahead and do a little recap. Let me show you again. Drag and drop, and it straightens. Pretty cool, right? So now you don't have to use it just like on the food itself. You could of course use this if there is some sort of horizon line in the back of your image. You can base it on that. Whatever you want to be that baseline, that horizontal component of the image, it will realign the image based on that line. Is that so cool, right? Cool. And so then the very final step in the entire process is to export the image based on where you're putting that image. You've got all sorts of other decisions to make, but what we're gonna do is instead of doing that now, we're gonna save that for next week, which I know, what am I doing? I mean, it's a tease. It's awful. I hate a tease. I'm sorry to do it to you, but this is already a long enough video this week. So we're just gonna save that for next time. And we're gonna talk all about all the dimensions and the numbers and the color space and all the fun things. So you stick around for that. But with that, I hope you learned a thing or two. Hope you got some inspiration going. I hope you jump behind that camera, and if you do and you share those images, feel free to tag me on Instagram. I'm at The Bite Shot. Love to see the work you're doing. But with that, you have a fantastic week. You stay out of trouble, and I'll see you later, okay? Bye. Bye. And look what I have. You gonna try it?
I can't wait.
Is it any good? Make sure it stays pretty. Oh. Yes, the food is edible.
It tastes pretty good.
No, you're a nerd. Ah!